In the vast, sprawling landscapes of India, where stories of hope and despair are written every day, we delve into two cases that expose the darkest corners of human nature. Our first story follows a night that began with the simple promise of a movie and a bus ride home, a journey that descended into a national nightmare. We will witness how the dreams of a 23-year-old woman were extinguished by an act of unimaginable brutality that sent shockwaves not only across India, but around the entire world, sparking a fire of protest and a desperate cry for justice. Then, we shift our focus to a different city, to a love story torn apart by murder. Just when you think the killer is caught and the case is closed, a shocking letter from a prison cell throws everything into chaos, pointing a finger at the victim's own husband and the police themselves. Prepare to journey into a labyrinth of lies, accusations, and a desperate search for a truth that seems to vanish into thin air. These are the shadowy cases where the line between justice and conspiracy blurs into the missed dot asterisk in our first case. Today, we travel to Delhi, the capital of India, a city that carries the deep imprints of history and culture. Jyoti Singh was born in Delhi on May 10, 1990. She grew up in a lower-middle-class family and was the eldest of 3 children. Her mother, Asha, was a homemaker, and her father, Badranath, was a laborer at the airport. The family endured difficult circumstances but fought to provide a good future for their children. Badranath, trying to make ends meet, often had to work double shifts. Despite the exhausting hours, he did his best. As a family, they had to make great sacrifices. They even sold their small farm to ensure their children could get a good education. In fact, Badranath's childhood dream was to become a teacher, but financial difficulties and life's hardships stood in his way, so he couldn't continue his education. However, this void became a great source of motivation for him. He was determined to achieve for his children what he could not for himself. He promised to do everything in his power to prevent his children from experiencing the hardships he faced and to help them reach their dreams. During that period in India, male children were often preferred over female children. Due to regressive attitudes, the education of girls was often neglected. However, Badranath and Asha broke this tradition and placed great importance on their daughter Jyoti's education. For them, their children's education was the priority, not their gender. Thanks to this support from her family, Jyoti was able to pursue her dreams. The night of the incident, December 16, 2012, was a day that started with ordinary plans. After finishing her physiotherapy internship, Jyoti set out to meet her boyfriend, Awindra. Awindra Pandey was a software engineer, and the couple had decided to meet at a shopping mall and then watch a movie. When the film ended, the couple wanted to go home and planned to take a rickshaw. A rickshaw, a 2-wheeled vehicle pulled by a person, is a commonly used and very cheap mode of transport in India. However, the driver did not accept them and instead took the pair to a bus stop, where they had to board a bus heading to Dwarka. At the time, they thought this bus was safe, because many people in the public used such buses. The young couple paid the driver a few rupees before boarding, and then the bus started moving. The couple noticed that there were 6 other men on the bus. These men and the bus driver were behaving very strangely, and it was clear they were drunk. At first, there seemed to be no problem. It just began like an ordinary journey. After a while, Awindra realized the bus was not going in the right direction. As the bus turned onto an increasingly deserted and dark road, the couple understood they were in danger. Awindra wanted to ask the driver about this. He stood up and tried to walk to the front, but suddenly the bus doors were locked, and the lights inside were turned off. At that moment, Awindra and Jyoti realized this was no ordinary journey and that they had fallen into a trap. The gazes of the 6 men on the bus were filled with menace, and they surrounded the couple. The Men's intentions were quite clear. Their eyes held lustful expressions as they looked at Jyoti. Realizing this, Awindra tried to protect Jyoti and attempted to stop the men by talking to them. However, the assailants paid no heed to Awindra's words. They pushed him violently and dragged him to the back of the bus. Awindra tried to resist, but one of them hit him on the head with a metal pipe. The impact caused Awindra to fall to the ground and lose consciousness. Then the assailants turned to Jyoti and began to drag her forcefully to the back. The poor girl was trying to understand what was happening. The men started attacking Jyoti with incredible violence. First, they tore her clothes and then physically assaulted her. As Jyoti screamed in helplessness, the attackers took turns raping her. This dark night became a complete nightmare for Jyoti. When he regained consciousness, Awindra tried to call for help from the window. He banged on the bus window and screamed, but in the darkness, no one paid attention to his cries. The attackers, however, continued without stopping. They continued to brutally beat and torture the unconscious Jyoti. One of them took an L-shaped metal pipe and forcibly inserted it into Jyoti's body. The toll of this brutal act would be heavy. It would cause massive damage to the young girl's uterus and intestines. Jyoti screamed from the horrific pain, but the bus continued on its way without stopping. On the faces of the attackers was a sadistic smile. This torture lasted for about an hour. During the ordeal, the attackers took turns driving the bus, each one getting in line to inflict more pain. After this horrific attack, the assailants threw Jyoti and Awindra out of the bus. A couple was left for dead under a bridge, naked and covered in blood. The injured Awindra tried to signal passing vehicles, but no one stopped. Finally, one person decided to stop and help them. This person immediately reported the situation to a highway patrol. Minutes later, the incident was relayed to the Delhi police. Thus, the terrible attack experienced by Jyoti and Awindra was finally brought to the attention of the authorities and the public. Jyoti and Awindra were taken to Safdarjung Hospital, and Jyoti was immediately connected to a ventilator. The doctors said her condition was extremely critical. An examination that night determined that only 5% of her intestines remained intact. Her body was covered in bruises and bite marks in the following hours. Awindra regained consciousness and, noticing many people around him, begged them for help. But it was too late for everything. The hospital staff immediately recorded the information Awindra provided and notified the police. There was intense activity in the hospital, and the staff was doing everything they could to keep Jyoti alive. However, the doctors stated that a large part of her intestines was damaged and her condition was very critical. The hospital staff tried to ask her various questions. Her body was extremely swollen, which made it almost impossible for her to speak. Despite this, Jyoti was given a piece of paper and a pen. She tried to express her pain and the horror she experienced in writing. The sentences she wrote would plunge the doctors into sorrow. "Help me. I want to live longer." Awindra told them that the men inside the bus attacked, while 2 men held him down as he tried to resist. The attackers not only inflicted physical harm, but also took all of Awindra's personal belongings from his pocket. The men tore Jyoti's clothes and attacked her. They took turns raping her and left brutal bite marks. After the incident, Jyoti's condition deteriorated rapidly. The injuries she sustained caused severe damage to many of her organs. On December 19, 2012, doctors operated on Jyoti for the 5th time. The purpose of the surgery was to clean the remaining parts of her intestines and repair the damaged sections as much as possible. However, despite all interventions, the doctors announced that Jyoti's condition was not stable. Her fever rose to 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and her internal bleeding continued. Despite all this, she communicated with the hospital staff. The Prime Minister of the time, Manmohan Singh, spoke to the press and said that all necessary support for her treatment would be provided. Jyoti's doctors decided that her treatment should continue in Singapore. However, this decision led to some controversy. Critics argued that Jyoti's condition was already severe and that she was not fit for transfer. For this reason, the government became the target of criticism. But the doctors defended their decision, stating that the medical facilities in Singapore offered the best chance for her survival. Unfortunately, during the 6-hour flight to Singapore, Jyoti's heart suddenly stopped. When they landed in Singapore, she was immediately taken to intensive care. Doctors stated that she had suffered severe brain damage, pneumonia, and a stomach infection, which complicated her condition. Jyoti's struggle for life would sadly come to an end just one day after arriving in Singapore. She would take her last breath around 4 a.m. According to Jyoti's brother, the treatment process in Singapore took too long, which reduced her chances of survival. When the news of Jyoti's death began to spread in the media, thousands of people across the country took to the streets to protest this horrific event. Within 24 hours of Jyoti's death, the police managed to detain several individuals. The statements given by Awindra played a major role in the capture of the suspects. It was revealed that the bus involved was a charter bus for a private school and was being used on the night of the incident to transport young students to school. The bus driver was Ram Singh, who was 30 years old at the time of the event. The police arrested him and conducted a detailed search of the bus. They found 2 metal pipes on the bus. These were the pipes used in the attack on Jyoti, and they still had her blood on them. Soon after, the police announced they had arrested 5 more people. 2 of these individuals were the bus driver, Ram Singh, and his brother, Mukesh Singh. The other 2 were a gym instructor, Vinay Sharma, and a fruit seller, Pawan Gupta. Vinay was 19, and Pawan was 17. Additionally, a 28-year-old migrant worker named Akshay Thakur was also arrested in connection with the crime. Akshay was married and a father of 1. He tried to flee Delhi immediately after the incident, but was swiftly caught by the police. The investigation revealed that this was not their first crime. That same night, they had also robbed a 35-year-old carpenter. The carpenter, Ram Adhar Singh, had faced threats from these men when he boarded the bus and was beaten and tortured by the suspects. They took his mobile phone, money, and other valuable items. He later reported the incident to the police. Unfortunately, despite his report, nothing was done, and this situation led to a greater tragedy. If the first incident had been reported to the police promptly, perhaps what happened to Jyoti and Awindra could have been prevented, as there was a police station nearby. After the event, charges of sexual assault, attempted murder, kidnapping, and murder were brought against all suspects. In the hearing held on January 3, 2013, the suspects denied all charges and hired lawyers to defend them. At a press conference on January 10th, the suspects' lawyers blamed the victims and made derogatory statements about them. They claimed this victims were responsible for the attack because they should not have used public transport and, as an unmarried couple, should not have been out on the streets at night. One lawyer stated, "In my entire professional career, I have not seen a single case where a respectable lady has been raped." He also made the following comment about the male victim, Awindra. He is responsible for this incident because he failed in his duty to protect the woman. If my daughter were in such a situation with an unmarried man, I would take her to the farmhouse and burn her before my very eyes. These defenses caused a huge public outcry, and the public condemned the lawyers' attitudes. The court proceedings began on March 13th, and at the first hearing, it was decided that the suspects would be kept in custody. One of the defendants, Ram Singh, died in police custody in March 2013 in a possible suicide. According to some reports and the police, Ram Singh hanged himself. However, his defense lawyers and family claim he was murdered. Following the incident, Ram Singh's brother, Mukesh, and the other inmates were moved to solitary confinement for security reasons after being beaten and threatened. The juvenile suspect, Mohammed Afroz, who was 17 at the time of the crime, was sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile detention center. This sentence was given due to his young age, despite his commission of the crime. He participated in various rehabilitation programs in the juvenile home and received education to build a better future, learning to sew and cook. A large portion of the public was furious with this decision. They opposed his reintegration into society and argued that such criminals should receive harsher punishments. On December 15, 2015, Mohammed Afroz was released. However, he could not return to his family because they had not overcome their hatred for him. They did not forgive him for the horrific crime he committed. Subsequently, the 4 remaining suspects were brought to court and tried to deny the previous charges. After a lengthy trial process, Mukesh Singh, Vinay Sharma, Pawan Gupta, and Akshay Thakur were found guilty of the charges. Unsurprisingly, the court sentenced these 4 men to death. This decision brought a small measure of relief to Jyoti's family. Mukesh Singh, one of the convicts awaiting the death penalty, made various statements during this period. A woman is not in danger if she is decent and moral. She doesn't wander around in the dark, and in that case, no one can harm her. Women are created by God to stay at home, wash clothes, and look after their families, not to wander outside at night, dancing in discos. He claimed that only in this way would women be respected, and these statements created a great wave of anger in society. Throughout the 7-year judicial process, the suspects continuously filed appeals and pleas for clemency. However, these requests were rejected by the President of India at the time. The execution of the 4 suspects took place on the morning of March 20, 2020. They were hanged, blindfolded, at Tihar Jail in Delhi. All 4 criminals were offered a final meal and new clothes before the execution, but they all refused the offer. Before being executed, Mukesh requested a holy book and stated his last wish was for his organs to be donated, but this request was not granted. Jyoti's funeral was attended by thousands of people. People took to the streets demanding justice. For Jyoti, protests were held in many parts of the country, including in front of the president's residence. Police used tear gas against these protesters. The British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, produced a documentary about Jyoti's story titled India's Daughter. On March 4, 2015, an Indian court banned the broadcast of the documentary in India, but it was aired in other countries. It was alleged that Mukesh Singh received 40,000 rupees from the producers for his interview in the documentary. The BBC acknowledged that this payment was made. Additionally, Jyoti's boyfriend, Awindra Pandey, was also interviewed for the documentary and received 70,000 rupees. This situation further fueled public anger. Finally, in 2013, Jyoti Singh was posthumously awarded the International Women of Courage Award by the United States. Asterisk. For our second case today, we return to India, to the city of Bangalore, known as the Silicon Valley of Asia. Payal Sarika was a young and hopeful girl, continuing her education at Bangalore's AMC College. Payal was originally from Assam, but came to this city for her university education. In her early years in Bangalore, she met the person who would profoundly affect her destiny, Ananta Mishra. Ananta was also studying at the same college. As their relationship deepened, Payal and Ananta decided to live together. However, their families opposed this relationship, standing as a major obstacle before them. Ananta came from the state of Orissa, and his father was serving as a police chief at the time. He had a traditionalist family, and they were not keen on him marrying a girl from another state. Pale's family, on the other hand, was modern and open-minded, but they did not want their daughter to marry so far away. The family's lack of consent for this marriage was a great disappointment for the couple. However, despite all these difficulties, they decided to marry. When Ananta brought Payal to his family's home, his parents changed their attitude towards her and treated her very coldly. Payal's warm and sincere personality, along with the respect and love she showed for his family, slowly began to win over Ananta's parents. For Payal, however, things were not so easy. Her family still had difficulty accepting Ananta as the heir. Son-in-law. After completing his education, Ananta opened a gym in 2010. This gym was his childhood dream. Payal found a job at a software firm in Bangalore. However, the distance between Orissa and Bangalore was about 800 kilometers. For them to live together, Payal had to move from Bangalore, and this meant a tough test for the couple. So Ananta made a decision and planned to open a gym in Bangalore. This way, he could both expand his business and spend more time with her. They lived in a 6-story building in the southern part of Bangalore. Payal would wake up early every morning to go to work and would take care of the gym in her spare time. December 17, 2010, was an ordinary day. Ananta, who was out of town, picked up his phone to call his wife. He dialed the number, but was met with a phone that rang but was not answered. At first, he didn't think much of it and assumed his wife was busy. However, as hours passed without any return call from Payal, Ananta was met with complete silence each time he tried. Worried, he decided to call the owner of Payal's apartment. He explained that he hadn't been able to reach his wife for hours and that her phone was now off. The landlord decided to check the situation in person, went to the apartment door, and rang the bell. But there was no answer from inside. He informed Ananta of this silence and used a spare key to enter. The scene inside would make the landlord's blood run cold. There were red stains on the living room floor and walls, and Payal was lying motionless on the bed in her room, covered in blood. He immediately left the room, first calling Ananta, then reporting the horrific incident to the police. At that time, an experienced police chief named Amesh was on duty at a nearby police station. However, on December 17th, he was assigned to a festival. When this news reached him, he immediately returned to the police station. Taking his team with him, he headed to the crime scene. The sight they encountered was horrifying. Payal had deep cut on her neck, and her hands were tied behind her back. Initial findings indicated that this was not a robbery, as there were no signs of forced entry. Jewelry and valuable items were in their place. According to the police, the person who committed this murder was likely someone Payal knew, or an enemy who held a grudge against her. While the forensic team collected evidence from the scene, Payal's body was sent for an autopsy. The next day, the autopsy report came back. The report revealed that Payal had been stabbed a total of 23 times and had been severely beaten before being killed. The police's first suspect was naturally her husband, Ananta, as the closest person is often the suspect in such cases. Therefore, the police examined Ananta's phone records, location data, and his movements during that period. The security cameras around the apartment were also checked, but no clues were found. It was proven that Ananta was in Orissa at the time of the murder. All this information revealed his innocence. Police Chief Amesh had to examine every detail to uncover the truth behind the incident. Meanwhile, the apartment guard came forward with important information. According to the guard, between 9:30 and 10 o'clock in the morning, a stranger had come and asked for Payal's apartment number. This man was wearing a thick jacket and glasses, and his face was quite pale. The police, evaluating this new information, called Ananta to the station again and asked if he had any idea who this stranger might be. Ananta thought for a moment, and then remembered a trainer who worked at his gym in Orissa. He said he had a small argument with this trainer a few days before Payal's death. This information was significant for the police. The trainer's whereabouts were quickly determined, and he was questioned about the murder. However, the investigation revealed he had nothing to do with the crime. Ananta, reaching out to the police again, decided to mention another suspect who had been on his mind for a long time. He stated that he suspected a man named James Roy, who had previously worked at the gym. Moreover, James was also a very good friend of Payal. Ananta had left the entire management and responsibility of the gym to James. However, as time passed, James began to change. His greedy attitude and behavior regarding money came to light. Complaints had been received that James had behaved inappropriately with some of the girls who came to the gym and had cast malicious glances at them. These girls had described his disturbing behavior to Payal and asked for her help. Payal was horrified by what she heard and shared the situation with her husband, Ananta. Ananta's trust in James was completely shattered. Upon this, he decided to fire James immediately. When the police examined Payal's phone records, they found that James had called Payal a few days before December 17th and spoken to her in a friendly manner. This situation further increased the police's suspicions. James's friendly phone calls made them think that a larger plan might be behind the incident. The investigation revealed that on December 17th, James was indeed in a location very close to Payal's apartment. On December 22nd, the police located and arrested James, bringing him back to Bangalore for questioning. James's interrogation was long and grueling. Under police pressure, James's composure gave way to tension, and eventually he broke down and confessed to killing Payal. After being fired, James had left Bangalore and moved to Hyderabad. But things didn't go well there either. Unable to find a job for a long time, James fell into severe financial distress. He contacted Ananta's business partner, Pavani Shankar. He told Pavani he was in a difficult situation, that no one would give him a job, and that he urgently needed one. On December 11th, 2010, James came to Bangalore and met with Pavani. Pavani took him to Payal's apartment. He explained James's situation to Payal and asked her to rehire him. However, Payal could not forget the mistakes James had made in the past. She flatly refused to give James a job again. This incident deeply hurt James's pride and caused great anger to build up inside him. When he returned to Hyderabad, the only thing on James's mind was revenge, and he decided to kill Payal. After making his decision, he started contacting Ananta again. He apologized and said he wanted to make peace. But this was nothing but a lie. James's real purpose was different, to learn Ananta's schedule and daily routine. When he learned that Ananta had gone to Orissa on December 16th, it was time for James to act. He immediately set off for Bangalore. He reached Payal's apartment and knocked on the door. When it opened, the old friendly expression on James's face was gone. Instead, his eyes were filled with great anger. James suddenly attacked her with a knife in his hand. Payal tried to defend herself, but James was too strong and knocked her to the ground. Then, using his knife, he slit Payal's throat. He then tied her hands behind her back with a cloth. To inflict more pain on her, he damaged things around the room, trying to make it look like a conflict during a robbery. After committing the murder, he quickly left the apartment. The apartment guard had seen him, but was unaware that James had just committed a murder. After the murder, James went to the nearest lake and cleaned the bloodstains from his body. He threw the knife he used in the murder, Payal's phone, and other items that could be evidence into the lake. He then returned to Hyderabad. However, he did not stay in Hyderabad for long. He was afraid the police might be looking for him after the incident. So after a while, he moved to another city and tried to hide there. But the police would track him down. When the police captured and arrested James, they found several important pieces of evidence on him. The knife James used to commit the murder, the laptop stolen from Pyle's house, and the clothes he wore during the murder were recovered. Forensic experts determined that some hair strands found on James's jacket and the bloodstains on his clothes belonged to Pyle. These findings were sufficient for the police. They now had strong evidence against James and confirmed that he was the perpetrator of this murder. However, the story would take an unexpected turn here. Just a week after his arrest, James would send a handwritten letter to Pyle's father. "I did not commit this murder. The real killer is Ananta. The police beat me and told me that Ananta's family had been the victim of a murder. They stated that if I did not take responsibility for this murder, they would kill me. Ananta bought all the police officers, and they collected evidence against me." Pyle's family was shocked to see this letter and immediately went to Bangalore to meet with Police Chief Amesh. They stated they wanted to speak with James. Amesh did not allow the family to meet with James. Upon this, her father directly appealed to the Karnataka High Court. In January 2011, the Karnataka police received the application from Pyle's parents, and after an 11-month review, the case was transferred to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. They began to investigate Police Chief Amesh and Anana Mishra as well. Amesh's and other family members' bank accounts were checked. In 2013, James filed a petition with the National Human Rights Commission, stating that he was forced to confess to the murder. With this new investigation, all the evidence found at the crime scene was re-examined, and everything the police had previously identified was re-evaluated. At this stage, it was realized that a mistake had been made. The police had overlooked an important witness in the case. A man named Raghu, who was Pyle's neighbor, stated that he heard some screams from the apartment on the day of the incident and saw James leaving the house shortly after. Police Chief Amesh realized that Raghu's testimony could be crucial and decided to find him. If Raghu testified against James in court, the charges against Amesh could be dropped, and the course of the case could change. Raghu, who was in another city, reached Bangalore and gave his statement to the Central Bureau of Investigation team. With Raghu's new testimony, it was confirmed that James had killed Pyle Sarika, and a new indictment was prepared based on this testimony. After a process of nearly 9 years, James Roy was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was also fined 100,000 rupees for perjury. Police Chief Amesh stated that this case was one of the most difficult of his life and that his professional career and reputation had almost come to an end.